He came every Tuesday. No rank, no medals, just 30 rounds and silence. The others laughed, thought he was just an old man burning ammo, until a Navy SEAL recruit caught a glimpse of the tattoo on his arm, and everything changed. The range opened at 7 a.m. sharp, but the old man was always there by 6:45. Always. It didn't matter if it was pouring rain or freezing cold. He walked the same quiet path across the gravel lot, boots crunching underfoot, faded denim jeans brushing just above the ankles, and a tan flannel shirt rolled to his forearms like clockwork. The cap on his head had once been navy blue, but was now sun-bleached and brown, curled at the brim just enough to shade his eyes. There were no logos, no flags, no slogans. His name, if you bothered to ask, was Jack Callahan, but most didn't. The younger guys at the range just called him Old Man 7 or Pops, sometimes the Ghost, because he barely spoke. He never brought more than one case, never fired more than one target, never stayed more than 30 minutes. One pistol, one box of 45 ACP, and a thermos that looked older than some of the recruits training on the far side of the lot. Nobody really knew what he did. Some assumed he was a retired trucker. Others thought maybe ex-police. But he didn't walk like someone winding down his life. He walked like someone still on mission, quiet, measured, deliberate. Every movement seemed mapped out, like even placing his range bag on the bench was part of a drill. He never greeted the front desk guy, just signed the clipboard, Callahan. No rank, no chit-chat. A nod, maybe. Down the hallway to lane 7. Always lane 7. The farthest from the building, the most isolated, where the Bluetooth speakers from the instructors couldn't reach, and where Egg Kamatu die. The staff had a nickname for him, the Metronome, because everything he did was consistent, unflinching. His shooting rhythm was so steady that even the ventilation fans seemed to adapt to his pace. 3 shots, reset. 2 shots, pause. Every magazine finished like a signature. Most of the young shooters didn't pay attention, too busy filming each other for Instagram or talking about their last night out. Some even joked, Old Man 7 probably thinks he Rambo. They laughed when he walked past. He never reacted, not once. But not everyone overlooked him. Chris, one of the range officers, had served 10 years Army. He watched Jack from a distance, watched the way his feet planted, should width, knees soft, watched the way he scanned the range like he was reading wind that wasn't there. Not twitchy like a rookie, not stiff like a poser. Calm, tactical, real. He doesn't blink when the brass hit him, Chris once said. That's not nerves. That's memory. Still, Jack Callahan remained a curiosity more than a presence. Background noise to most, a myth to a few, until the day the rhythm changed. That morning, a group of young Navy recruits had come in for off-duty practice. Loud, confident, tattoos still fresh. They took the middle lanes like they owned them. One of them, tall, lean, with a sharp jaw and a crew cut, dropped his bag 2 lanes over from Jack. His name was Ryan Matthews. SEAL recruit fast track, sharp shooter. He's seen a lot for his age. He thought he knew how to spot real from fake. At first, he didn't notice the man to his left. Just some old guy burning ammo. Until 5 minutes in, when he paused to reload and heard it. That rhythm. It wasn't the sound that caught Ryan's attention. It was the silence between. The way the shots landed. Tight, centered, confident. No overcorrection, no panic, no wasted motion. Just precision. Ryan looked over, just a glance. What he saw shifted something in him. The old man's grip was textbook. Thumbs aligned, wrist locked, sight picture perfect. And his stance, there was no tension, no hesitation. He wasn't fighting recoil, he was dictating. It felt trained, but not recent. Ryan watched longer this time. His unit kept joking, arguing over targets, showing off on camera. But Ryan kept listening to the silence between the shots on lane 7. There was something unsettlingly clean about it, like watching a surgeon operate in slow motion. Jack Callahan didn't flinch, didn't rush, didn't look around for approval. Because he didn't need it. It wasn't just the way he shot. It was the way he paused. Ryan Matthews had seen plenty of shooters, some flashy, some efficient, some dangerous, but none like this. The old man in lane 7 didn't shoot to impress. He didn't adjust his stance between volleys. He didn't shake his hands out. He didn't talk to himself. He simply shot. 3 rounds, reset. 2 rounds, reset. All within a grouping so tight, Ryan wondered if the target had moved at all. Ryan finished reloading his magazine, but his attention didn't return to his own target. His eyes drifted left. Again, the stance, the rhythm, the grip. It was all too precise, too familiar. It nagged at something deep inside him, something from buzzsaws, from Coronado, from instructors who didn't need to raise their voice to be remembered. And then it happened. As the old man reached down to his bench to reload, his sleeve rolled up just slightly above the elbow. Ryan's eyes caught something, just a flicker. The edge of ink faded by sun and time. He leaned a little. It wasn't a flashy tattoo. Not a skull, not an anchor, not a unit name sprawled in Gothic script. No, this one was small, subtle. 2 numbers, 1 insignia. It looked like it had been there for decades, blacked out by age, not artistry. But Ryan knew it instantly. First, recon. His throat caught, his instincts sharpened. He glanced again to confirm. There was no mistake. That wasn't the kind of ink you picked off a wall. That was the kind you earned or died trying. Ryan set his mag down slowly, almost reverently. The noise around him began to blur. The laughter from Chris and the others. The soft thud of rounds from other lanes. None of it mattered. He stepped closer, not intruding, but with the calculated caution of someone approaching a living legend who hadn't asked to be noticed. "Excuse me, sir," Ryan said quietly, keeping his hands loose at his sides. "That tattoo, is that first recon?" The old man didn't flinch, didn't look up, just finished reloading. Then he straightened, set the pistol on the bench, turned his head slowly, and locked eyes with Ryan. There was no surprise in his face, no pride, no challenge, only wait. A pause stretched between them, longer than it should have been. And then, finally, the old man spoke. Once. That was it. One word. Not yes, not no. Just once. Ryan held his breath without meaning to. The way the man said it, it wasn't dismissal. It was history compressed into a single syllable. A lifetime distilled. A door cracked just wide enough to suggest, don't push it. So he didn't. Ryan nodded, stepped back to his own lane, and picked up his weapon. But everything felt different now. His own grip, which had felt solid minutes ago, now felt performative, like muscle memory without memory. His trigger discipline was suddenly aware of itself. His breathing, slightly off. He kept glancing sideways. The man next to him wasn't just shooting. He was remembering. With each shot, there was something behind his eyes. Not aggression, not fear, but memory. Every movement was a ritual. The others didn't notice. Chris was still joking about magazine speed. Petty was playing with brass like poker chips. One recruit was trying to film his target through a phone screen. But Ryan was locked in, watching, listening. Jack Callahan, he had to be Jack, wasn't just firing. He was carrying something with him, something heavy, and yet he moved like it was weightless. Like he'd been carrying it for so long, it had become part of him. He fired one more shot. Perfect. Then he paused, exhaled softly, and reached for his thermos. Ryan felt a pang in his chest that had nothing to do with awe. It was something closer to shame. Because for years, he'd thought the stories were fading, that the real ones had either died or disappeared, that their legacy was being buried beneath loud voices and empty bravado. But one of them had been here all along. In Lane 7, no fanfare, no hashtags, no medals on display, just a box of ammo, a faded cap, and a silence loud enough to drown everything else out. Ryan Matthews had heard a lot of things in his short career. Shouts from drill instructors, radio calls laced with adrenaline, war cries from brothers in arms. But he'd never heard a word carry as much weight as that one. Once. It echoed louder in his mind than a gunshot, not because of how it was said, but because of what it left unsaid. That word wasn't a claim. It was a boundary, a marker, a warning. Ryan knew what it meant. It meant, yes, but don't go there. It meant, I was, but I'm not anymore. It meant that life, that world, it cost too much to carry into casual conversation. So he didn't push it. He stepped back to his lane and resumed shooting, but everything felt off now. His grip, his stance, his breathing, they were solid, but not like his, not like Jack Callahan's. He tried to get back into rhythm. 3 rounds. Reset. 2. But his ears kept pulling left, listening to the quiet, methodical tap-tap-tap of Callahan's fire. It wasn't just accuracy, it was intent. Every shot had the timing of memory. Like he'd rehearsed this pattern in 1,000 different jungles, on 1,000 different mornings that weren't mornings at all, but moments of survival. Petty walked over mid-string, grinning like a kid. "Hey, Matthews," he chuckled. "That old dude still got it, huh?" Ryan didn't respond. He didn't even look away from Lane 7. Petty followed his gaze. "You good, man?" Still nothing. Because something had clicked for Ryan that his friends hadn't felt yet. They saw an old man shooting clean. Ryan saw a ghost walking the range. Jack Callahan had been somewhere, done something, carried names Ryan would never read in a book. And now, here he was, shooting 30 rounds like it was just another Tuesday morning. But it wasn't. Not for Ryan. He waited until Callahan set the gun down again. Slide locked, chamber clear. The same deliberate ritual, and stepped closer. "Sir," Ryan said again, quieter this time. "If you don't mind me asking, when did you serve?" Callahan didn't answer right away. He pulled a cloth from his bag and began wiping down the frame of the pistol. Slow, unhurried. Every pass of the rag across the metal was like a breath being counted. Then, without looking up, He spoke. 66 to 74. Recon, Southeast Asia. Ryan's heart paused for a beat. The timeline, the unit, the silence. It all added up. He swallowed hard. Laos? He asked. Callahan gave a small nod. Among other places. Ryan stood still for a long second. The sound of gunfire around him faded, not in volume, but in importance. It felt like the rest of the range had retreated, leaving only Lane 7 and the space between two men. Ryan looked down, then back up. "Sir, did you ever work with SEALs?" For the first time, Callahan allowed the faintest, most reluctant hint of a smile. Not pride. Not. Just recollection. "We all did a little of everything back then," he said. "You swam, you survived, or you didn't." Ryan couldn't help but grin, despite the lump in his throat. "My CO told us once about an op in 71. Deep jungle recovery. He said the lead was wounded, but still carried 2 men out under fire. It was classified for years." Jack didn't blink. He didn't confirm. He didn't deny. Just kept cleaning his weapon. Then came the quiet reply. "A lot of things were classified for years. And that was it. The door wasn't slammed shut. It was gently closed. Enough to remind Ryan and anyone else who might have listened that some stories aren't meant to be told. They're meant to be carried, like scars under sleeves or names etched in memory, not stone." Ryan stepped back with a nod. No more questions. That one exchange had said more than any war story ever could. The sound of gunfire resumed around them. But for Ryan, everything was quieter now. Not because of the noise, but because of what he had seen. A man who didn't need to teach to inspire. A man who didn't ask for thanks because he didn't do it for applause. A man who survived not to be remembered, but to remember. Callahan zipped his bag, stretched his back, and walked away without looking back. Ryan didn't follow. He just stood there a little longer, feeling the weight of a truth passed without ceremony. A truth that fit into a single word, once. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the hum of the ceiling fan blending into the faint echo of gunfire he had heard that morning. But it wasn't the sound that kept him awake. It was the silence that came after. The look in Jack Callahan's eyes. The word, once. It wasn't enough, not out of nosiness, not out of ego, but because something in that single word felt like a window into a story that wasn't his, but still needed to be understood. He reached for his laptop at midnight. The room glowed with the pale light of the screen. He opened search tabs, tapped through databases, moved quickly at first, then slower, more careful as the breadcrumbs got thinner. It wasn't easy. Jack Callahan didn't exist on Facebook. No Instagram, no LinkedIn, no mentions in military honors databases, no photos from reunions, no news articles, no retired Marine interviews. Nothing public. The man was a ghost. But Ryan had learned a thing or two about digital footprints. He cross-checked with public records, found a Jack T. Callahan who had listed a P.O. box in Kansas for the past 20 years, same age range, then a grainy PDF scanned from an old roster, Recon Company, 1st Marine Division, March 1971. His pulse picked up. He narrowed the search. National Archives, declassified combat logs, MACV SOG records. Most of the names were redacted, just lines of black ink covering memory. Some pages looked like they'd been scrubbed with fire. But then, buried in a dusty mission report from March 6, 1971, he found it. Just one line. S. Sergeant Jack T. Callahan, 1st Recon. Location, Laos. Mission, deep recovery under contact. Wounded. Declined medevac. 7 recovered. Award declined. File sealed. Not for broadcast. There was a note in the margin, typed in a font too old to fake. Asset considered irreplaceable. Now silent. Ryan sat back in his chair. That word again. Silent. He stared at it for a long time, like the paper could talk back. Back then, silence was a tactic, a survival mechanism, a code. You didn't tweet about trauma. You didn't pose for post-op photos. You didn't come home and write memoirs. You came home, if you were lucky, and you didn't talk. And some, like Jack Callahan, kept that silence for 50 years. But what struck Ryan more wasn't just what Callahan didn't say. It was how much he had still given. The coin, the glance, the body language, all of it communicated something louder than words. Not look, but look deeper. The next morning, Ryan showed up at the range earlier than usual. Still dark out. He sat on the bench outside, not to shoot, not to prove anything, but just to be there. The way Callahan was, he needed to feel what it meant to wait in silence. When Callahan arrived, 6:45 a.m., as always, he didn't look surprised to see Ryan. Just nodded once, the way men do when there's nothing left to explain. Jack moved past him, signed in, headed for lane 7. Ryan didn't follow. He just watched. Every motion was the same. Range bag, thermos, pistol. Clean and precise, like a ritual handed down through war, loss, and repetition. Chris noticed it too. From the front desk, he leaned over and whispered, "You been hanging around that old guy, huh?" Ryan nodded. "Do you know who he is?" Chris shrugged. "Not really, but I thanked him once. Said, 'Thanks for your service, sir.' And you know what he told me?" Ryan turned toward him. He said, "I didn't do it for you to thank me." Chris laughed under his breath. Didn't say another word. Ryan didn't laugh. He couldn't. Because now it all made sense. Jack Callahan didn't want a parade. He didn't want a banner. He didn't want to be discovered. He wanted to be remembered, quietly, by those who knew what to look for, by those willing to listen without noise, by those willing to earn the silence. That day, Ryan didn't shoot. He just sat at the edge of the range, watching every move, absorbing every breath of the man in lane 7. And for the first time in a long while, he felt what it meant to witness something true. Not staged, not performed, but lived. The following week, Jack Callahan returned, just like always. Same truck, same boots, same faded flannel rolled up to the same sun-worn forearms. Same slow gait across the gravel lot, the range bag low in his right hand, the battered thermos tucked under his left arm. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. The place hadn't changed. But something. Silence. Not the absence of noise. There were still rifles cracking, brass bouncing, murmured laughter from younger shooters. But the tone had shifted. The air felt different, less casual, more aware. Ryan Matthews had arrived early. Not just him. Chris and 2 others from his group were already there, standing near the back benches. They weren't joking this time. No loud intros, no flexing, just nods and an unspoken agreement to give space. When Jack passed, none of them said a word. But they all straightened just slightly. He moved past them without acknowledgement, but not without awareness. Jack noticed everything. He always had. The way they stood, the way they stayed back, the way the laughter died off when he walked by. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. He reached lane 7, unzipped his bag, and began setting up. Methodical, precise, the same as always. But even the paper target seemed to hang differently on the clip that morning. Like it knew it mattered more now. He fired his first 3 shots. Tight, clean, perfect. Ryan watched from 3 lanes over, eyes fixed, breath slow. He wasn't trying to imitate anymore. He was trying to understand. Halfway through Callahan's second string, Ryan stepped forward, not casually, deliberately. He waited at the edge of the lane until the old man paused to reload. Then, silently, Ryan extended his hand. In it was a sealed box of 45 ACP. Fresh, heavy. Jack looked at the box, then up at Ryan. No smile, just a pause, a flicker of question in the eyes. Ryan offered only 5 words. I figured 30 wasn't enough. Jack studied him, the same way he might have once studied a ridgeline or a jungle path, measuring threat, measuring intent. Then, for the first time, he gave a nod that lasted longer than a breath. He accepted the box and returned to firing. No words exchanged, but something important had passed between them. Something more permanent than small talk. Respect. The kind that doesn't need. When the box was done and the lane finally went silent, Jack didn't leave immediately. He sat on the edge of the wooden bench behind him, unscrewing the top of his thermos and taking a slow sip. The smell of coffee mixed with the faint burn of gunpowder. It was the scent of memory. One by one, the younger men approached him. Not in a line, not together. They came separately, without coordination. Like they all somehow understood this moment wasn't meant to be shared, just observed. Chris came first. Just a nod, a small handshake, no words. Then came another, one of the younger guys who had laughed a week before. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Sir, he said, we looked you up. Jack didn't reply. He just watched the boy fumble with the weight of what he now knew. You saved a lot of people. Jack wiped the rim of his thermos with his sleeve. His voice was soft, even. They saved each other. No credit taken, no spotlight claimed, just truth, spoken like a fact of VE. Finally, only Ryan remained. He didn't speak right away. Just sat down beside the old man, shoulder to shoulder, both of them staring down the range at nothing in particular. There was a stillness between them, not awkward, not strained, just quiet, complete. After a long while, Ryan asked, "You ever think about teaching?" Jack exhaled, slow. I spent 30 years trying to forget everything I teach. Ryan nodded. He understood. But some of us, he said, need to remember it. Jack didn't reply right away. He took another sip, set the thermos down, leaned back against the wall. You don't teach this, he said. You absorb it. Quietly, over time. Ryan smiled faintly. That's why I'm still listening. Jack looked at him for a moment longer than usual. Then he stood, wiped his hands on his rag, and zipped up his bag. As he turned to go, He left the unopened ammo box sitting on the bench. No explanation, just a gesture. Pass it on. The thing about presence is that even after the man is gone. That morning, after Jack Callahan packed up his gear and walked off into the rising sun, same gait, same quiet pace, something unspoken remained in the air. It wasn't reverence, not yet, but it was awareness. From that day forward, Lane 7 was no longer just a piece of concrete. It became something else, a place where distractions fell away, a space where silence had meaning. A class, unofficial and unannounced, had begun, and the instructor never said a word. Ryan was always there early now, and not just to shoot. He started bringing a notebook, but he never wrote in it. It sat closed beside his bench, more symbolic than practical, a reminder that he was there to absorb, not record. Others followed his lead. Chris stopped blasting music through his earbuds. Petty, once the loudest, now spoke in low tones, if at all. The jokes didn't stop entirely, but they came softer now, like everyone was trying not to break something fragile. They still competed, still drilled, still trained, but they started doing something new. They watched. They watched how Ryan stood when Jack was nearby, how he slowed down, how his form got cleaner, not just more accurate, how his breathing synced with his movements, how he didn't just shoot, he studied, and they followed suit without being told. No one said, "Let's be like him." They just were. They started timing their shots in patterns, 3, then 2. Not because someone wrote it on the board, but because that was how Jack did it. Petty began bringing just 1 box of ammo. Chris kept a thermos now, though he still hadn't figured out how to look like he didn't care that he had one. Even their posture changed. No more leaning on tables between shots. No more sloppy transitions. Each mag load became deliberate. Each trigger pull was preceded by a breath, not a flex. They stopped filming each other. No one needed likes anymore. They weren't trying to impress the world. They were trying to respect the space. Callahan never asked them to, never acknowledged it. But Ryan knew he noticed. Sometimes, just before Jack left, he would pause at the door and glance once over his shoulder. No smile, no nod. But it was enough to let Ryan know that the message had been received and was being passed along. One afternoon, a new recruit walked in, loud, fresh off orientation, full of fire and assumptions. He took the lane next to Ryan, fired 2 rounds, then said with a grin, "What's with the quiet? Somebody die here or something?" Ryan didn't answer. He just turned, looked at the kid for a long second, and then nodded toward lane 7. "Yeah," he said. "Someone almost did. More than once." The kid blinked. "What?" Ryan gave a half smile. "Just watch the stance. You'll figure it out." Later that day, when Jack arrived, early as always, the new recruit fell silent the moment he saw him. He didn't know why. He couldn't explain it. But something in the way the old man carried his range bag made him set down his phone and straighten his back. That's how it worked now. No syllabus, no ranks, no handouts, just observation, just respect. And one man in a faded flannel, walking to lane 7, changing everything, without ever saying a word. The question sat with Ryan for days before he had the courage to ask it. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't the hunger for details or war stories. It was something deeper, something closer to guilt. The kind that comes when you know someone has carried something for decades, and you've only just learned how to listen. So one morning, just after Jack Callahan fired his final round and set his pistol down with that same quiet finality, Ryan walked over and sat beside him on the bench. Jack didn't look up. He unscrewed his thermos and took a sip. Waited. Ryan spoke carefully, each word placed like a step across broken glass. "Do you still remember their names?" Jack's eyes didn't flicker. He didn't blink. He just reached into the range bag at his feet and pulled out something unexpected. Not a gun part, not a tool, but a folded square of paper, yellowed at the edges. He handed it to Ryan. 7 names. First names only. Last initials. No ranks. A simple list. Ryan read them once, twice. The silence wrapped around them like fog. "They were your team?" Jack nodded once. "They were better than me." Ryan looked at him, surprised. "But you're the one who—" Jack cut him off with a glance. Not sharp, just final. "They're the reason I'm still here, not the other way around." Ryan folded the paper carefully, as if it might fall apart from breath alone. "Did you ever talk to their families?" he asked. Jack stared down the range. His voice, when it came, was softer than usual. "Some, but not for long." "Why?" Jack's reply took its time. "Because they wanted stories. And all I had was moments." He took another sip. Ryan let the silence grow. Let it say what couldn't be said. Then Jack spoke again, this time not looking at Ryan, just into the distance. "There was one op, March '71. Jungle was thick, hot. We were deep, too deep." He paused. "No comms, no backup. And we ran into them. Not just patrols, a company, maybe more." Ryan waited. One of the new guys, Walker, froze up. Another tripped a wire. I got hit in the leg. Whole thing lit up like hell opened a door. I should have bled out, but McNeil dragged me behind a tree line. Price doubled back for Walker. Jack's voice didn't waver, but there was something in the way he exhaled, like each word cost him oxygen. "I carried 2 of them out, but we lost 3. McNeil, Price, and Jensen. Their bodies were never recovered, but I know where they are." Ryan didn't ask why he'd never told anyone. He already knew the answer. Jack didn't carry medals. He carried names, not on ribbons, not in frames, but in folded paper. Worn down by years of reopening and remembering. Ryan swallowed. His voice was barely a whisper. "They never put your name on any citation?" Jack gave a dry chuckle. "There was a recommendation. I declined. Told them to put the ink somewhere else." "Why?" "Because medals fade, but silence sticks, and the only people who needed to know already knew." Ryan nodded slowly. The meaning didn't just register. It carved itself in. "Do you ever wish you could have said more?" Jack turned toward him, eyes sharp, but not unkind. "I said enough when I came back." Another silence passed between them. Then Ryan reached into his own range bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it, a small brass plate. "It's nothing official," he said, "but we were thinking of screwing this into the bench." He handed it over. Jack read it. "Lane reserved until he says otherwise." For a moment, Ryan thought he might have pushed too far. But Jack just folded the cloth back around the plait. Handed it back. "Don't make it about me," he said. "Make it about what we're trying to keep alive." Ryan smiled softly. "We already are." And that was all either of them needed to say. Jack Callahan didn't say goodbye. He never had. Not when he left the Corps. Not when his team didn't make it back. Not when the medals stopped showing up, or when the phone calls from old commanders slowed to nothing. And certainly not now. He just didn't come back. One morning, Ryan showed up early as usual. He sat on the bench near Lane 7, coffee cooling slowly in his hands, eyes scanning the lot like they always did. But Jack didn't come. 6:45 passed, then 7. Still no truck, no crunch of boots, no faded flannel, no worn thermos. Just a breeze, stirring dust across the concrete, and the unsettling truth. He might be gone for good. Ryan waited. A part of him wanted to believe maybe Jack was late, maybe just caught up, taking a different route. Maybe he was somewhere else, being silent in another place. But deep down, Ryan knew. He wasn't coming back. It wasn't a tragedy, not exactly. It wasn't a disappearance either. It was something harder to describe. A final movement. Quiet, deliberate, like every other thing Jack had ever done. The man had simply finished, and left the rest to those who were still learning. Later that morning, Ryan walked up to the front desk. Chris was there, sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone. "Morning," Chris said, without looking up. "Jack didn't come today," Ryan said quietly. Chris paused, glanced toward the parking lot. "Huh." Ryan hesitated, then placed something on the counter. The coin, the same one Jack had handed him weeks ago. Heavy, worn, real. Chris picked it up and turned it in his palm. First recon insignia on one side. On the other, just 2 words. "Still here." He looked up, eyebrows drawn together. "He gave you this?" Ryan nodded. Chris didn't ask anything else. He didn't have to. Instead, he walked to the back office, came out with a small brass plate. Quietly, without a word, he handed it to Ryan. "Lane 7, reserved until he says otherwise." That afternoon, while most of the younger guys were finishing up, Ryan stayed behind, alone. He walked over to Lane 7, kneeled down at the wooden bench, and screwed the plate into the top plank himself. No ceremony, no speeches, just a drill, a screwdriver, and the weight of something worth preserving. He sat there for a while, not thinking, just feeling. The lane was empty now, but it didn't feel vacant. Jack Callahan wasn't physically there, but his presence clung to the air, embedded in the concrete, alive in the way the others now handled themselves. There was less swagger in their walk, less shouting, more precision, more pause. Jack hadn't vanished. He'd simply passed the torch in silence. That night, Ryan opened his laptop again. He pulled up the mission report from March 6, 1971. Scanned the same line he'd read dozens of times now. Asset considered irreplaceable, now silent. He added one note beneath it, hyped with care, now remembered. Then he closed the file. The next morning, he returned to the range as usual, set his gear down on the bench next to Lane 7, adjusted his stance, took a breath. 3 rounds, reset. 2 rounds, reset. Not to copy, but to honor. As he reached for his next mag, he paused and smiled. He wasn't alone. Chris stood a few lanes down, posture sharper than usual. Petty, quieter than anyone had ever seen him, was wiping his barrel like it was sacred. Another new kid, the one who used to joke, now fired only 10 rounds, carefully, methodically, then packed up without a word. It wasn't about being elite. It was about being earnest. They had absorbed something, not a tactic, not a lesson, a code. Later, as they were leaving, Chris asked Ryan, "You think we'll see him again?" Ryan looked down at the coin, still eye. The weight of it now, something personal. "I don't know," he said. "But even if we don't, he's still here." Have you ever stood next to someone for years and never known who they were? Maybe it was a man at your local diner, always in the same booth, same order, eyes scanning the room not out of boredom, but habit. Maybe it was a neighbor who mowed his lawn in straight, perfect lines, never missing a week, never waving more than once. Or maybe it was an old man at a shooting range, in faded denim and a flannel shirt, who said less in a month than most people say in an hour, but made every word count. They don't tell you who they are. They don't wear it on their sleeves. They don't hang plaques on their walls or parade photos across their Facebook profiles. They just show up, quiet, consistent, like time never shook them loose. Until one day, someone notices the way they move, the way they reload without thinking, the way their hands remember what their mouth refuses to explain, and something clicks. That's what happened with Jack Callahan. To most, he was just the old guy on lane 7. To some, he was a curiosity. To a few, he was a code waiting to be deciphered. And when he was finally seen, not for his silence, but because of it, the entire world around him changed. A range learned to lower its voice. Young men straightened their backs. Targets were approached with reverence, not bravado. And stories, once sealed under redacted files and untold trauma, began to live again, not in books, not in broadcasts, but in posture, patience, and presence. Because real legacy isn't loud. It doesn't demand. It invites. It doesn't preach. It echoes. And it's carried forward, not by fame, but by those who choose to remember. Jack didn't need to be celebrated. He didn't want a statue, a ceremony, or a medal pinned to a vest he'd never wear again. He just wanted us to pay attention, to notice the men who never asked for thanks, to listen when there's nothing being said, to carry names not on walls, but in hearts, to live well, not for glory, but because someone else never got the chance to. That's why we still leave the brass plate above lane 7, not as a shrine, but as a reminder that a man once stood there, not shouting, not posing, just being, and in doing so, taught more than most do in a lifetime of lectures. So now, I'll ask you what Ryan Matthews asked himself the day he first saw that ink on Jack's forearm. Have you ever met someone like that? A veteran who never boasted, never told stories unless asked. Someone who carried decades of silence with more strength than most carry rank. Someone who never needed to be seen to matter. Because the right people always noticed. If you have, say their name. In your heart, in the comments, in the quiet. Tell their story, not to glorify, but to keep it alive. Because every generation has its Jack Callahan. And every Jack Callahan leaves be, waiting to learn how to listen. And maybe that Ryan is you.
This audio is made with Audio Toolkit for Windows Store, downloaded for free now.